Chapter 1. The Road of Fog. The first time Claire saw Hollow Creek, the fog had already crept across the road as if trying to block her entrance. The rental car slid around narrow curves and towering old trees, while the moisture seemed to run down the windows like invisible fingers reaching for her. The temperature had dropped sharply after the last highway sign, and since then, not a single vehicle had crossed her path. The road felt forgotten by the modern world, and the village was more a whisper than a tangible place. Claire had come seeking peace, or at least silence. The tragedy of her sister, the emotional breakdown, months of therapy that led nowhere. Everything inside her seemed trapped in a personal fog, as thick and impenetrable as the one outside. The library job in the village had appeared like fate's invitation. A quiet place, far from pitying looks and suffocating compassion. It was all she wanted, or so she thought. The entrance to the village was marked by a wooden arch, weathered and worn, with the name Hollow Creek barely legible. Past the arch, the road turned to gravel, and each tire crunch sounded like a lament. Houses emerged one by one, tucked between trees, aged but lived in. No movement in the windows. No one in the streets. Only the fog, persistent like an alien breath, refusing to lift. The library stood near the old village church, a stone building with faded stained glass windows. Claire parked in front of a two-story structure, its facade covered in dead ivy and a wooden sign hanging from a rusty chain that creaked in the wind. The sound was swallowed by the fog, as if the air itself rejected unnecessary noise. Inside, the silence deepened. Tall shelves, heavy with dust-covered books, filled the space. A grandfather clock ticked slowly in the background, dragging time downward. On the front desk, an envelope with her name, written in flowing blue ink. Inside, a key to her new home, a cabin at the edge of the forest provided by the village council, and a brief note, "Take good care of the books. They remember." The next day, Claire settled into routine. Few villagers visited the library. A child who never touched a book, only stared. An old man who read the same volume every day but never turned past page 5. And a woman with pale eyes who spent hours silently watching the shelves, as if listening to something Claire couldn't hear. All of them watched her with silent interest, as if wanting to say something, but holding back. The feeling of not belonging was constant. But it went beyond that. There was something wrong in the air, in the looks, even in the floor beneath her feet. She began to notice strange patterns in the books, smudged fingerprints, torn-out pages in older volumes, annotations in unfamiliar languages. Some shelves seemed to move ever so slightly when she wasn't looking directly at them. On the third night, in her cabin by the forest, Claire woke to what she first thought was the wind. But it wasn't. It was a low, sorrowful sound, someone crying among the trees. She looked through the window and saw the fog thicker than ever, shifting unnaturally, as if something moved inside it. She considered going out, but instinct screamed against it. Instead, she stayed still, eyes locked on the fog now brushing against her porch. Scratching sounds began at the door, followed by a whisper that seemed to call her name. When she opened it, no one. Only damp footprints, leading into the forest. The next morning, she tried speaking with some villagers. A man named Clyde muttered that the fog had been restless since she arrived. An elderly woman named Maggie, her eyes red as if from endless crying, grabbed Claire's hand and whispered that the cycle has begun again. When Claire asked what she meant, Maggie turned and rushed inside, locking the door. Back in the library, Claire was determined to find answers. She searched through the basement archives. There, hidden inside a wooden box, she found a journal. It belonged to a woman named Eleanor Boone, dated 1893. The last words written were, "They say the fog demands, and this time it wishes to remain." A chill crawled up her spine. Claire closed the journal, and when she lifted her gaze, the fog had begun to seep into the basement through the tiny window slit. She hadn't come here just to start over. The village hadn't brought her here by chance. That night, Claire receives a strange invitation to a forest gathering led by the village reverend. A ritual that everyone accepts as normal, but one rooted in ancient, terrifying symbolism. It will be her first step toward uncovering what the fog truly hides. Chapter 2. The Hollow Rite. The letter arrived without a sender, folded in four, its paper damp and yellowed as if it had been retrieved from deep within the earth. It lay beneath the cabin door when Claire woke, after a restless night filled with whispers and creaking noises from the forest. She hesitated before opening it, but curiosity overpowered her fear. In the center of the page, written in twisted letters, was a single sentence: "Join us at nightfall. The fog wishes to be witnessed." Below it, an ancient symbol, resembling roots and open eyes, something caught between nature and the occult. The note unsettled her deeply. No signature, no address, no directions other than that vague promise of a gathering. But the mention of the fog, that was what truly disturbed her. Claire no longer believed it to be a meteorological phenomenon. It was almost conscious, as if it watched, waited. She felt it now more than ever. The library that day felt stranger than before. Her regular visitors were absent. The silence was so intense that her footsteps echoed like hammers. When she returned to the basement, Eleanor Boone's journal still lay where she'd left it, but the following pages were stained, as though someone had tried to wash them away with salt water. Still, she made out portions about an ancient cult held when the fog returns hungry. Eleanor had written of nighttime gatherings led by someone referred to as the Watcher of Shadows. His identity, however, was never mentioned outright, as if to speak his name meant death. That afternoon, Claire tried to ask Officer Dean Holloway about the gathering. He listened with a stony expression, avoiding her eyes, then replied cryptically, "Some traditions in Hollow Creek endured because the alternative was worse." He then tipped his hat and returned to the station. At sunset, an imperceptible change fell over the village. Lights in homes dimmed, one by one, as if the town were preparing to sleep or to hide. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, and the fog descended in thick waves, veiling homes like mourning shrouds. Claire, following her instincts, packed a flashlight and Eleanor's journal before heading out. The path into the forest seemed darker than ever, but oddly, lanterns were lit along the trail's edge, leading her in silence. She followed them. The fog hovered inches from the ground, moving like sentient smoke. After several minutes, Claire arrived at a circular clearing, where a bonfire burned without giving off heat. Dozens of villagers stood around it, silent. They wore dark robes and wooden masks with blank expressions. Only one man remained unmasked, Reverend Elijah Boone, standing at the circle center with arms raised. He wore a crimson robe bearing the same symbol from the note, and his eyes looked entranced. Claire stood at the clearing's edge, hidden by trees. Her skin tingled, heart racing. She wanted to leave, but something, some unseen force, held her still. The Reverend began chanting in a language she didn't recognize, deep and rhythmic. The villagers echoed it, forming a ritualistic hum that vibrated in the ground. Then, an object was brought to the center, a moss-covered stone box. The Reverend opened it carefully, revealing a bone fragment, possibly human, wrapped in red thread and thorns. A murmur passed through the circle. Everyone knelt. Elijah raised the relic above his head, and the fog began to spiral upward, forming a column around them. The scene was surreal and horrifying. Claire felt the air pressure shift, her ears ring. The forest scent vanished, replaced by rot and earth. The fire grew brighter, and in its smoke, a figure began to take shape, humanoid, but twisted as if formed from pain. Then Maggie Langdon appeared beside her, also hiding behind the trees. She held a candle and whispered words in a trembling voice. Claire watched, stunned. Maggie looked at her and said this was only the beginning, that the fog needed someone to remain awake, and Hollow Creek had made a pact long ago, silent sacrifices in exchange for survival. Before Claire could ask anything, Maggie pressed a necklace with the same symbol into her hand and vanished into the woods like a ghost. The fog surged violently, as if reacting to Claire's presence. Elijah Boone stopped chanting and looked directly at where she stood. Slowly, all masked faces turned her way. Her heart froze. But no one came after her. Instead, they turned back to the fire. The ritual continued as if her presence had been expected. Claire fled. The path back felt endless, with strange noises pacing her through the trees. Never seen, only felt. Back at the cabin, she locked doors and windows. When she finally tried to sleep, she found the necklace Maggie had given her hanging from her mirror. She hadn't taken it with her. It was just there. Part of her now. Claire investigates the necklace's symbol and discovers a hidden section of the library, where records of ancient village cults are kept. There, she finds her sister's name among the documents, though Emily was never supposed to have been in Hollow Creek. Chapter 3: Echoes in the Memory. The necklace hung from the mirror, pulsing with a strange energy, as if alive. Claire approached it slowly, her heart racing, and touched the pendant with trembling fingers. The symbol etched into the charm, the same one from the rituals, the note, and Eleanor Boone's journal, was now startlingly clear. Its surface was rough, almost organic, as if carved from bone. The moment her skin met it, a jolt ran through her spine, and an uninvited memory crashed into her consciousness. She was a child again. Her sister, Emily, ran into the woods chasing something unseen, while Claire screamed for her to stop. The trees seemed taller back then, and the fog, it was there too, even in that memory. Dense. Aware. Emily vanished among the trunks, and a chorus of whispers surged around her. Claire blinked. Back in the present, breathless. That memory wasn't real. It shouldn't exist. She had never been to Hollow Creek as a child. Had she? Determined to find answers, Claire returned to the library before dawn. The fog still blanketed the village like a funeral shroud, but she ignored the dread. Using a master key from the desk, she went down to the basement and spent hours combing through boxes, folders, and crumbling volumes. Then she found something strange, an old blueprint of the library from 1871. It showed an additional room behind the northern wall of the basement, a room that didn't exist on any current map. She inspected the wall, running her fingers along the wood and shelves. When she pushed against a panel covered in dusty genealogy books, it gave way. A hidden passage revealed itself, narrow and dark, descending in uneven stone steps. The smell was overpowering: mold, damp earth, and something older. She descended with her flashlight trembling in her grip, breath shallow. At the bottom, she found a concealed chamber. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with handmade volumes, all marked with unfamiliar symbols and dates. In the center stood a crude stone altar, scarred with melted wax and dark stains. But what drew her attention most was a rusted iron cabinet, sealed with a heavy padlock. She found an old tool nearby and managed to break it open. Inside, dossiers, aged photographs, handwritten letters, and records spanning decades. Each described villagers who had vanished every 30 years. The pattern was unmistakable: 1893, 1923, 1953, 1983, and the most recent, 2013. But what made Claire's blood freeze was the folder labeled Emily Whitmore, Cycle of 2013. Her sister's name. Claire dropped to her knees. How could it be? Emily had never set foot in Hollow Creek. Her death had been ruled an accident, drowning in another state. But here were documents with her photo, older than she remembered, eyes vacant, standing in front of a house covered in ivy. Letters signed in her handwriting. A report written by Elijah Boone himself, describing how Emily had refused to participate in the ceremonial bond and fled into the forest, disappearing afterward. The necklace in Claire's hand grew warm. The room darkened, even with the flashlight on. On the opposite wall, moisture spread in the shape of a handprint. Claire fled, stumbling up the stairs with the weight of truth pressing her down. The village had changed. People watched her differently now. Eyes held something between reverence and unease. Dean Holloway visited the library one rainy evening. His face pale, voice trembling, he said some truths shouldn't be dug up, then handed her a key to a locked compartment in the basement of the station and left without another word. That night, Claire used the key. In the compartment, more documents, ancient rites, bloodlines, instructions written on parchment. Among them, a scroll that spoke of marked lineages, those born with ties to the spirit of the fog, meant to preserve or to be sacrificed. Her grandmother's name was among them. There was no doubt now, Claire hadn't come to Hollow Creek by chance. She had always been part of the story. Back at the cabin, she found a wooden box on her bed. Inside, a gray ceremonial dress bearing the pendant symbol embroidered on the chest, and a note, "It's almost time. The fog awakens hungry." That night, the fog poured into the village like never before. Entire houses vanished within it for hours. Screams echoed from the woods. A pulsing orange glow beat like a heartbeat in the distance. Claire sat on her bed, the ceremonial dress draped over her lap, knowing the next choice was close. And this time, she would not be just a witness. Claire confronts Reverend Boone, demanding answers about her sister and her own connection to the village. But the conversation turns dark, and he reveals that the next ritual is already set, and that she is at its center, whether she agrees or not. Chapter 4. The Sermon from the Abyss. The following morning arrived without sunlight. The fog remained dense and motionless, as if time itself had refused to move forward. Claire spent hours sitting in the cabin, the ceremonial dress draped beside her like a silent and inevitable presence. The images from the night before, the folder with Emily's name, the stain on the wall, the embroidered symbol, swirled in her mind in an unrelenting storm. She knew now that she could no longer stay on the outskirts of this story. She needed answers. And only one man in Hollow Creek was reckless or powerful enough to provide them: Reverend Elijah Boone. That morning, Claire made her way to the church. The stone structure, with its dark slate roof, looked more like a tomb than a sanctuary. The stained glass windows no longer filtered light. Instead, they shimmered with a sickly green glow, as if reflecting something that didn't come from the sun. The door groaned loudly as she pushed it open, its sound echoing through the empty nave. Inside, the Reverend was already waiting. Seated at the altar, facing away, he murmured prayers in a guttural language, the same Claire had heard during the forest ritual. When she approached, he rose slowly, unsurprised, as though he had known she was coming. Claire confronted him without hesitation. She demanded to know why her sister appeared in the village's records, why she herself was entangled in ancient rites, and what the fog truly was. Elijah listened silently, his gaze unwavering and intense. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, each word heavy with meaning. He told her that Hollow Creek had been built upon a spiritual fault line, a fracture between the living world and a domain of veiled entities. The fog, he explained, was the manifestation of that boundary. Not just weather, but sentient mist, hungry for memory and identity. Every generation, the balance needed to be preserved through a ritual of consecration. Someone had to be chosen. Not just anyone, only those with a bloodline capable of bonding with the Hollow. Families like the Whitmores. Claire felt herself reel. Elijah then revealed that Emily had been drawn to the village unconsciously, just like all chosen are. But she had refused her role. She tried to escape her fate, and the fog punished her. Her death hadn't been accidental. It had been a consequence. The fog does not forgive betrayal. Claire, stunned, asked why she had been summoned now. The Reverend said that with the previous cycle broken, the veil had weakened. The entities were seeping through, slowly but surely. Hollow Creek stood on the edge of spiritual collapse. The next ritual would not merely reinforce the veil, it would require a permanent seal, something deeper. And Claire was the last heir. She stepped back, horrified. Elijah guided her to the rear of the church, where an iron gate barred entry to a crypt. He unlocked it, revealing a spiraling stairwell lit by flickering, eternal candles. The walls of the crypt were lined with portraits of women, all bearing similarities to Claire, chosen ones from previous cycles. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, atop which lay a dark, leather-bound book glowing faintly, the Codex Nebulae, the sacred compendium of the Fog's Pacts. He offered it to her, saying that if she read it, everything would become clear. Claire hesitated, but curiosity overcame fear. The book's touch made her vision blur. Images surged, forests burning green, faceless mouths speaking beneath roots, children being taken by fog. And in the center of it all, herself, dressed in gray, standing before a mirror that reflected nothing. She dropped the book, gasping. Elijah steadied her and said the ritual was to be held the following night. She must wear the dress, follow the lantern-lit path to the ancient clearing, and allow the bond to be completed. It was the only way to prevent collapse. The alternative, he warned, was far worse. Back at the cabin, Claire endured a day of visions and broken memories. Knocks echoed from nowhere. Whispers slithered out of books. The fog crept not just through windows, but through her thoughts. A part of her was already across the veil. In a moment of clarity, she decided she wouldn't follow blindly. She had to find another way to end the cycle, if not escape, then transform it. She recalled Eleanor Boone's final journal entry. This time, it wishes to remain. What did it mean? Was the fog itself female? Or was there something, or someone, within it? That night, Claire stood before the mirror. The ceremonial dress hung nearby. The necklace was already around her neck. Outside, the lantern path had appeared again, beckoning like an offering to the dead. This time, she knew, she would not walk it as a witness. She was its center. As Claire prepares for the final ritual, she finds a secret journal from her grandmother hidden in the forest. It reveals there may be a way to seal the fog without sacrifice, but it will require facing the heart of the veil itself, a place no one has ever returned from sane. Chapter 5. The Heart of the Fog. Night fell upon Hollow Creek like a verdict. Every home seemed wrapped in silent complicity, as if its residents already sensed what was coming and accepted it with resigned stillness. Lanterns lit along the forest path once more, glowing like vertebrae leading into the woods. Claire, now wearing the ceremonial dress, walked with slow, deliberate steps. The pendant pressed against her chest like a warning. There was no turning back. But she wasn't heading toward the ritual. There was another possibility. Fragile, dangerous, but real. That hope had come from a name Reverend Boone had whispered at the end of their conversation. A name absent from any public record but deeply familiar. Helena Whitmore. Her grandmother. The same woman her father claimed had vanished without explanation. Claire remembered something Maggie Langdon had once said, a book that bleeds secrets, buried in a forgotten clearing where the fog whispers truth instead of promises. Claire was going to find it. If there was a way to stop the cycle without becoming its next victim, this book would show her how. Veering from the lantern trail, she disappeared into the forest. The trees pressed in tight, and the fog moved like breathing skin. Sounds warped. Time bent. The deeper she went, the stronger the pull became. Something was calling her, not to consume, but to reveal. The ground pulsed beneath her feet. Somewhere in the distance, a heartbeat echoed, slow, vast, ancient. After what felt like hours, she found the clearing. Circular, surrounded by moss-covered stones, and in its center stood a solitary fig tree, black, dead, yet standing as if defying time itself. Its exposed roots twisted together to form a natural altar. Nestled among them, a book. The leather cover was cracked like old skin. The symbol from her necklace was engraved faintly. Claire opened it with trembling hands. The pages were frantic, messy, but at the top of the first page was a name: Helena Whitmore, Cycle of 1953. The journal detailed everything: Helena's selection, her descent into visions, the rituals she refused, and most importantly, her discovery. There was a place deeper within the forest, a place she called the heart of the Vale, where the true presence behind the fog resided. Not a force of nature, but a sentience. A thing of memory, built from the pain and sorrow of all those who crossed its threshold. Helena believed that if someone with a marked bloodline reached this place and made the correct offering, not of flesh, but of memory, the cycle could be broken. But she warned, the confrontation would be brutal. The veil would reveal not just truth, but what one fears most about themselves. Claire sat beneath the dead fig tree, the journal pressed to her chest. The offering had to be her most painful memory, and she knew what that was: the day Emily vanished, the guilt she had carried, the moment she had failed to protect her. Taking a deep breath, Claire rose and moved toward the deeper forest. The trees grew contorted. The roots pulsed. The fog hissed words she couldn't quite understand. Whispers became echoes, then screams. She passed through time without knowing how long had gone by, hours, days, or none at all. At last, she reached a pit in the earth, surrounded by breathing roots. At its center, a glowing blue fissure pulsed like a wounded eye. The heart of the Vale. She stepped closer. Images began to form in the mist: herself as a child, Emily running, her grandmother screaming, villagers bound in silence. Then the entity appeared. It had no fixed shape. It was composed of hundreds of faces, all weeping, all trying to speak, all made of memory and grief. At its center, Emily's eyes, wide and filled with unbearable sadness. The creature moved toward her, not in rage, but hunger. Claire knelt, holding her grandmother's journal against her chest, whispering that she was ready. But not as a sacrifice. She came to remember. The entity paused. The fog flickered. For the first time, it hesitated. Claire let the memory come fully. She remembered the woods, the scream, the laughter, her own fear. She cried. She asked forgiveness. She gave the moment power, not to haunt, but to connect. And the veil trembled. The light brightened. The fog screamed. Everything shattered. She woke in the clearing. The journal lay beside her. The necklace had split. The fog was gone. The forest breathed freely. Emily sat beside her, alive. Claire and Emily returned to a hollow creek they no longer recognize. Some villagers remember nothing. Others act like the events never happened. But something lingers in the air, and the ritual may still be unfolding in a deeper layer of reality. Chapter 6. The Village That Forgets. Claire returned to Hollow Creek just before dawn, Emily by her side. Though her body ached and her mind reeled from the confrontation within the heart of the Vale, she felt lighter. The fog had receded. The forest no longer pressed in like a trap. For the first time, it felt like something had truly ended. But as they stepped past the village gate, something was wrong. Hollow Creek was waking up, but it wasn't the same village they had left. Homes stood intact. Smoke rose from chimneys. Birds chirped in the distance. Villagers walked along the cobblestone paths, smiling, carrying bread, chatting. The village looked peaceful. Normal. Too normal. Claire stood still as a woman passed by with a basket of fruit and offered a polite nod, no recognition in her eyes. A pair of children skipped by, laughing. An old man tipped his hat, asked if she was visiting. No one knew her. The ritual, the fear, the fog, it had all vanished from their memory. Confused, Claire ran to the library. She expected chaos, books misplaced, relics out of place, evidence of the veil torn open. But everything was pristine. Shelves lined up perfectly, dusted and neat. The basement door was locked. When she looked for the hidden room, it was gone. Not hidden, gone. As if it had never existed. On the second floor, the mirror where the ceremonial dress had once hung now reflected only her stunned expression. No dress. No necklace. No trace of the last few nights. She left the library and headed to the sheriff's office. Dean Holloway stood outside, chatting with a woman about parking spaces. When he saw Claire, he smiled politely, no recognition. When she mentioned the ritual, the veil, even his own key, his smile faltered. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." Something had reset. She hurried to Maggie Langdon's home. It was boarded shut, overgrown with ivy. Inside, dust and silence. But in the back room, she found an old photograph, a much younger Maggie standing beside a familiar face, Elijah Boone. Dated 1953. Claire searched the house and found a letter tucked inside a cracked dresser drawer. It was addressed to Maggie, signed by Helena Whitmore. The letter confirmed everything. Helena and Maggie had tried to break the cycle decades ago. Helena had failed. Maggie had hidden, waiting for another Whitmore. That had been Claire. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the first floor. She held her breath, hidden behind a shelf. Someone had entered. Boots descended the basement steps. When he emerged into view, she recognized the silhouette. Elijah Boone. But his face was different. Calm, blank. Not the fiery reverend from before. He looked confused, as if unsure why he had come. He called her name. Claire stepped into view, and to her surprise, he recognized her. Faintly, as if through fog. He said he had been having dreams. Dreams of a village covered in ash. Of people repeating the same words. Of fire and silence. Since the night of the fog's retreat, the world felt fractured. Time didn't feel real. Some people remembered. Some didn't. Some never existed. Claire explained everything she could. Elijah listened, then showed her something, the Codex Nebulae. It looked the same, but the pages had changed. No longer did it contain rituals of sealing or sacrifice. Now, it described something called the Rite of Resonance, a final trial for those who had altered the fabric of the veil. It was meant to decide which version of reality would remain. Claire was the key. To complete the rite, she would have to walk the echoes, fragments of possible pasts and unrealized futures, each one a test. She would confront versions of herself, of the village, of truths never born. And at the end, in the core of choice, the veil would either collapse or close forever. That night, Elijah led her to the village cemetery. Amid the fog and broken stones stood a forgotten mausoleum, covered in vines. He unlocked it. Inside, a spiral staircase glowing with golden mist. He handed her a silver mirror and said, "Inside the echoes, you may forget who you are. Use this to remember." Claire descended alone. And when she reached the bottom, she was back in Hollow Creek. But the houses were too tall. The sky was violet. People wore glass masks. In a window's reflection, she saw herself, older, gray-haired, sitting with children around her, reading. The first echo had begun. Each echo will test a piece of Claire's soul. In some, she is a saint. In others, a monster. But all lead to one version of Hollow Creek, where the fog speaks, and where Emily still lives. Chapter 7. The Mirror of Truth. The staircase behind her vanished. Claire stood alone in a twisted version of Hollow Creek. The houses loomed too tall, windows blinking like eyes. The sky swirled in shades of violet and ash. Villagers passed in silence, wearing glass masks that reflected infinite versions of their faces. Claire moved slowly, the silver mirror clutched in her hand. The fog here glowed gold, thick and warm, not menacing, but heavy with memory. The first echo greeted her in eerie quiet. She passed a group of children singing her name. They called her Mother of Wind. Flowers were laid at her feet. People bowed. A young woman approached and thanked Claire for saving the village, for sealing the veil, for becoming a living saint. Inside the village church stood a statue carved in her likeness, tall, serene, but with sewn-shut eyes. Claire felt dread. When she asked about Emily, the people grew confused. They didn't know that name. In this version of Hollow Creek, Claire had become the fog's vessel, but only by surrendering her past. The fog had kept her, purified her, rewritten her. And in exchange, her sister was erased. She lifted the mirror. The reflection was not the revered figure, but the woman covered in ash and mud, broken yet real. The mirror glowed. The village began to crumble. Houses shattered into dust. Statues cracked. The masked villagers turned to mist. And Claire fell into light. The second echo came with a scream. The sky bled crimson. Hollow Creek was in ruin. Black vines choked the buildings. Fire danced in the windows but gave no warmth. Villagers were chained to walls, whispering Whitmore in hollow unison. In this world, Claire had failed. The veil had devoured everything. She saw herself at the center of the square, tied to a twisted tree, her face gaunt, lips sewn shut. Maggie crawled nearby like a beast, blind and broken. Dean wandered aimlessly with no eyes, no tongue. The church bell rang endlessly. No one stopped it. And then, through the smoke, Emily, a silhouette in the mist. She didn't run. She simply watched. This was a world where Claire had tried to fight, but not understood. She had used force, not memory. And the veil had retaliated. She held up the mirror. This time, the reflection was her as a child, holding Emily's hand, crying for her to stop running. The mirror cracked. The trees split. The fog screamed. Everything collapsed. The third echo was nothing. Claire floated in a void filled with reflections. A hall of endless mirrors. Each showed a different Claire. One smiling, one monstrous, one weeping blood, one pregnant, one old, one ghostly. In the center sat one Claire, curled in fetal position, eyes closed. Then the voice came. Not in words, but through her bones. The fog spoke. It said it was not a creature, but a memory. A convergence of all forgotten things. When Claire tried to break the cycle, she had awakened it fully. Now it wanted her to choose. Become the guardian, keeper of the threshold, sealing off the veil with her presence. Or release all versions of herself, let the cycle end permanently, but unleash all possible realities into one. Claire trembled. The mirror in her hand cracked further. Emily appeared before her. No longer a vision. Real, or something like it. Her eyes wide with pain and longing. Her mouth tried to form words, but no sound came. Claire knelt. She pressed her forehead to her sister's. And she remembered. The laughter. The scream. The forest. Her own voice, too late. The guilt, not from failing, but from forgetting. Claire whispered, "I forgive you." And then, "I forgive myself." She lifted the mirror for the final time. It shattered. The world screamed. The echoes collapsed. And Claire awoke. In the clearing, the forest was calm. The journal lay beside her. The necklace was broken. The fog was gone. Emily sat beside her, breathing, alive. Claire and Emily returned to a changed village. Some remember, some don't, but something still lingers. Claire must choose whether to rebuild Hollow Creek or leave it to the silence it now deserves. Chapter 8. The Silence of Roots. Morning light fell over Hollow Creek with a clarity it had never known. Not golden, not gray, but clear, as though the air itself had been rinsed of something ancient. Claire walked beside Emily in silence. Each step forward felt like leaving a dream behind, and yet it was all real. The trees shimmered with dew. The ground was soft beneath their feet. The fog, for once, had vanished. But peace never comes without echoes. As they approached the village, Claire noticed the subtle changes. Some homes stood just as before. Others were missing, replaced by empty lots overgrown with wild grass, as if they'd never been there. The villagers moved with strange calm, their faces familiar, but their eyes distant. A few smiled as the sisters passed. Others avoided their gaze. Hollow Creek was breathing again, but not the same breath. Dean Holloway was the first to greet them. Tired, pale, but alert. He told them there had been strange tremors during the night. Visions. Dreams of twisted streets and upside-down trees. Of villagers speaking in tongues. Then, nothing. Silence. Most people couldn't remember anything from the past week. Claire confirmed the cycle was broken. But something had remained awake beneath the surface. The fog had been more than a force, it had been a memory. And now, Hollow Creek existed in a liminal space. Free of the veil, but not untouched by it. That afternoon, Claire and Emily returned to the library. It still stood, though different. The old books on rituals and lineage were gone. In their place, blank journals, untouched and waiting. The shelves no longer whispered. The air was warm. Claire took it as a sign. The village's story could begin again. Downstairs, she checked the basement. There, under a fallen shelf, a faint shimmer caught her eye. The silver mirror. No cracks. No reflection. When Emily reached to touch it, it slid gently away, as if guided by unseen breath. Claire understood. The veil was gone, but not silent. The mirror remained as a bridge. A warning. A key. She wrapped it in cloth and stored it beneath a floorboard. In the following days, the village shifted slowly. Some residents packed and left, following instincts they couldn't explain. Others stayed, planting gardens, repairing homes. The fog did not return, but its absence was a presence in itself. Claire and Emily refused to become symbols. They did not want to be saints, nor martyrs. They wanted time. One evening, Maggie Langdon appeared on their porch. Older, frilier, but her eyes were sharp. She said she had been spared, again, because her role wasn't yet finished. She warned that the veil never truly dies. It sleeps, changes form. One day, in another place, it would try again. But Hollow Creek, for now, was safe. The next morning, Maggie was gone. Only a single white flower remained on the windowsill. Claire had never seen it before. But when she touched its petals, the memory of the veil hummed through her. Claire and Emily spoke often of leaving, of finding a new beginning, away from haunted forests and forgotten rituals. But something about Hollow Creek kept them rooted. Not cursed, grounded. They stayed. Claire took over the library, chronicling what she could. She wrote about the fog, not as a threat, but as a teacher. Emily tended a small garden behind the church, planting herbs where the altar once stood. Travelers began to arrive, people who had dreams of mist, of paths that led nowhere and then to Hollow Creek. Claire would greet them at the door, offer tea, and sometimes a story. She never told everything, but she always told enough. The mirror remained hidden beneath the floor. And on nights when the sky grew too still and the wind whispered too clearly, Claire would light a candle, open her grandmother's journal, and speak aloud the words that ended the cycle. The roots of fear feed forgetfulness. But memory is what keeps us human. And Hollow Creek would sleep.